Welcome to the deep dive. We often talk about the world's wealthiest people, the billionaires, the titans, but when you look closely, you realize what it takes to build and maintain that power is far more than just financial savvy. It requires a precise, often ruthless architecture of ambition.
That's right. It really does. For centuries, the path to titanic wealth has demanded this meticulously crafted system, an architecture of influence, as you put it, that marries immense resources with absolute control over perception.
Yeah, perception seems key.
It is, and we've synthesized a fascinating stack of sources today that span from, 19th century industrial barons like Rockefeller and Carnegie, right up to 21st century figures in tech, media, and finance.
Okay, so our sources highlight this definitive playbook for mastering the intersection of massive assets and a self-crafted myth. Our mission, then, is to extract the nuts and bolts of that strategy. How do they turn vast, sometimes questionable resources into what we call unassailable influence?
Well, we'll start by unpacking the original foundations of power, specifically how titans like Vanderbilt and Rockefeller used both, physical violence in some cases and strategic discretion to solidify their early empires. That calculated invisibility was sort of their shield.
Right, hiding in plain sight, almost. Then we'll see how this playbook evolves, yeah.
Exactly. Because modern titans realized hiding was maybe obsolete. They shifted the strategy entirely, making relentless media engagement and celebrity the new currency of control. And often, it became a sophisticated mask for deception.
Okay, so visibility becomes the weapon instead of invisibility.
Precisely. And finally, we'll connect these historical and modern tactics to the major global consequences we face today, from, say, the structural justifications for rising global inequality to the acceleration of corporate power driven by the age of deep learning and AI.
Okay, let's unpack this playbook, starting with the original architects of American power and the calculus of control.
So when we examine the rise of the first industrial titans, we immediately see this profound duality, right? A tension between the means and the image.
How so?
Well, on one hand, there was this physical, almost bare-knuckle ruthlessness required to establish a monopoly. But on the other, an intense need for public or personal discretion.
Ah, so the discretion was the necessary shield against the scrutiny the ruthlessness demanded.
You got it. Cornelius Vanderbilt is maybe the quintessential example of the sheer, raw violence of early competition. He was a pioneer, no doubt, forging the giant corporation by consolidating his disparate New York rail lines into the massive New York Central and Hudson River Railroad.
Right, he helped institutionalize American business structures.
He did. But his methods, especially in his early shipping career, were anything but institutional. They were rough.
That's the key distinction, isn't it?
It really is.
Hmm.
In his early shipping days, the opposition he employed was literally physical. He didn't just aim to economically defeat rivals. He sought to, crush them into submission.
Our sources detail how he would cut fares to 50 cents, which was half the rival's fare, and simultaneously order his captains to physically ram or beat competitors' boats off the routes.
Yeah, it sounds less like market competition and more like organized piracy.
I mean, the sources make it clear this wasn't just aggressive maneuvering. The chronicler Philip Hone actually witnessed this chaos firsthand, didn't he?
He did. He described the boats as actively contending with the Nimrod all the way down and being so physically close that they were in contact, pushing furiously at top speed. It's quite a visual.
Incredible. And when Hone finally arrived,
He and his luggage were literally pitched ashore like bundles of hay. That just shows the violence was a tangible part of the cost of doing business back then. Vanderbilt pioneered using the corporate entity to formalize power, but he built that entity with a level of force we rarely see today.
Okay, now, let's contrast that really rough style with John D. Rockefeller Sr. He had the same level of ambition, right? The same desire for absolute control.
Oh, absolutely. But he played a completely different game, the game of calculated modesty and strategic invisibility.
How did that work?
Well, Rockefeller understood that immense visible wealth was not just a symbol of success, but a liability, especially in the charged political environment of the late 19th century.
Right, with rising populism and calls for regulation.
Exactly. So despite building what would become the largest fortune in world history, he chose to live relatively modestly. His $40,000 house, while substantial, was deliberately positioned as looking, and I quote, small and cramped beside Amasa Stone's towering manse and other gaudy monstrosities.
That specific comparison is crucial, isn't it? It wasn't just accidental thriftiness.
Not at all. It was an intentional choice to convey the misimpression of being a lesser light in business, specifically to avoid public scrutiny and political demands for regulation.
So a performance of modesty.
You could say that. It also connects to what historians call the Puritans' discomfort with possessions. Rockefeller had this deep, almost religious, nagging Baptist anxiety that outward displays of wealth might appear, you know, idolatrous or boastful.
Ah, interesting.
He was genuinely embarrassed by the outward signs of the social recognition which he receives. So his discretion served two functions: self-protection from populist attack and the performance of moral rectitude.
Which was essential while Standard Oil was engaging in its truly ruthless economic expansion.
Precisely. He effectively weaponized his lack of a public persona, hashtag tag 1.2 ruthlessness as a business strategy.
And when we look beneath that quiet facade at Standard Oil's actual business methods, we find the ruthlessness was purely economic, wasn't it? And devastatingly effective.
Oh, absolutely. Their tactics, particularly routine underselling, didn't require beating boats like Vanderbilt. They just required financial stamina.
So how did the underselling work?
Well, Standard Oil was the industry's low-cost producer. Their strategy was simple. They could simply dump oil at or below cost in any region where an independent competitor threatened their dominance.
Bleeding them dry until they sold out, basically.
Exactly. And Rockefeller, with typical self-righteousness, framed these predatory price cuts as necessary retaliation against those who dared to compete.
He essentially argued they deserved the pain. I recall that quote, "It's dripping with irony," that he used to defend himself. They wanted competition, and when they got it, they didn't like it.
Precisely. It's the ultimate expression of winning the argument by eliminating the opponent entirely. What's fascinating here is the sheer infrastructural control he achieved.
Right, it wasn't just about the oil itself.
No. Standard Oil became so deeply interwoven with the burgeoning railroad business through rebates, secret deals, that sort of thing, that it effectively controlled virtually all the oil traffic running over crucial tracks like the Erie and the New York Central.
So he didn't just control the oil, he controlled the movement of the oil. That level of consolidation wasn't lost on the established industrial families, I imagine.
Not at all. The Commodore's son, William H. Vanderbilt, who was head of the powerful New York Central, reportedly noted presciently back in the 1870s that Rockefeller was the man who would become the richest man in the country. He saw the scale of the system Rockefeller was building.
Okay, so if Rockefeller mastered the strategic invisibility of the market, Andrew Carnegie showed us that controlling labor required a different kind of public mask, right? Calculated public benevolence.
That's a good way to put it. He cultivated this reputation as a friend of labor. But the question is, how much of that was genuine altruism and how much was just sophisticated business strategy?
Well, the evidence suggests it was smart business, geared entirely toward maintaining output, doesn't it?
It really does. Our sources show that in the 1880s, when other manufacturers were demanding drastic, across-the-board wage cuts, Carnegie intentionally broke ranks. Why? To avoid provoking costly, protracted strikes.
There was a specific moment in 1882.
Yes, 1882. Carnegie and his partners agreed to the wage rates demanded by the Amalgamated Labor Union. This was a stunning move, completely against the grain of every other manufacturer at the time.
And the reason?
The reason, reported by the New York Times, was incredibly revealing. Carnegie Brothers give as a reason for signing that they are crowded with orders which must be filled at all hazards.
Ah, so the supposed altruism was purely instrumental. Keep the furnaces and mills running full because they had too many existing orders to risk interruption.
Exactly. His benevolence ensured maximum production and profit, not necessarily worker welfare, though that might have been a side effect. This tactical flexibility is definitely a hallmark of the Titan playbook. Hashtag tag 1.3 wealth mobilized for political influence.
Moving beyond internal operations, these titans also perfected the art of mobilizing their vast wealth for direct political influence, didn't they? Shaping the environment they operated in.
Absolutely. Carnegie, especially in his later philanthropic phase, was a master of this. He used capital to influence policy on a global scale.
We see a very specific example related to international arbitration treaties. Carnegie wasn't just writing op-eds, he was financing a lobbying operation.
He certainly was. In 1911, he set aside a substantial $10,000, which was a massive sum back then, specifically to pay clergymen to travel to Washington, D.C.
Right, to lobby senators on behalf of those treaties of arbitration. Why clergymen, though?
Well, because they wielded moral authority. He viewed capital as a tool that could purchase credibility and then leverage it to shape global policy. He was turning his money into a political force multiplier.
And his political leanings were consistently tied to protecting his primary economic engine, steel.
Oh, definitely. While he was initially drawn to the Republican Party by the anti-slavery platform in Lincoln, his allegiance was really cemented and strengthened by their unwavering support for high tariffs.
Okay, let's unpack that mechanism. High tariffs meant.
It meant protectionism. These protective tariffs effectively blocked cheaper imported steel from entering the American market.
Which means Carnegie's American-made rails faced absolutely zero-cost competition domestically.
Exactly. This kept his domestic steel business robust and highly profitable. So Carnegie's political activity, while sometimes couched in philanthropic terms later in life, was fundamentally aligned with protecting his profit margin. It just reinforces the idea that for these titans, politics is just another dimension of the business operation.
So, synthesizing part one, the classic playbook seems clear. Achieve dominance through pretty cutthroat tactics, whether physical like Vanderbilt or economic like Rockefeller.
Right.
But cloak that power in strategic discretion and use capital to seamlessly align the political landscape with your financial needs.
Precisely. They sought power that was felt, deeply felt, in the boardroom and the legislature, but not necessarily seen on the front page.
No.
But, as we'll see, that strategy couldn't last. The rise of mass media forced a fundamental reversal.
That brings us perfectly to part two. The shift from discretion to the calculated, relentless embrace of celebrity. The modern titan doesn't hide their light. They seem to weaponize the spotlight, turning their persona into their greatest asset.
It's really the evolution of influence in the age of mass media, isn't it? Where Rockefeller was actively embarrassed by social recognition, figures like William Randolph Hearst, Robert Maxwell, and later, the tech leaders actively manufactured it. Media consumption became the new currency of control. Hashtag tag 2.1, the weaponization of media and public persona.
William Randolph Hearst is a classic example, using his own newspapers to control his narrative, right? His papers, particularly the Journal, became these massive circulation engines by dramatically covering the Spanish-American War.
He certainly achieved notoriety and influence, massive influence. But this high-profile coverage came at a profound financial cost. And this is where the image really divorces from the reality.
How so?
Well, the sources indicate that while his papers saw this huge circulation boost, they were simultaneously losing more money than ever. The revenues simply couldn't cover the immense added costs of producing special war editions and, critically, cabling expensive dispatches from the front lines in Cuba.
So the narrative of power masked a reality of fiscal trouble.
Exactly. There were rumors of fiscal mismanagement so severe that there was even talk his mother might replace him as publisher. That tells you the image, the influence, was the product, maybe more than the profit itself.
Okay, and Robert Maxwell took this media pursuit to an extreme in the UK political scene, didn't he? Making himself the constant headline.
Maxwell was just relentless in seeking public recognition. He used his political position as a member of parliament almost entirely as a PR platform.
How did he do that?
He made himself readily available for a TV appearance, always. Crucially, he used the Commons bar like his personal salon, constantly buying drinks for guests, always ordering a double even if a single was requested. Power move. Definitely a display. He would loudly shout remarks in the House and constantly mix his serious political pronouncements, like demanding British businessmen export more, with details of his latest commercial coup.
So he used politics and parliament as a backdrop to market his commercial identity and assert his personal dominance.
That's it exactly. Now, Roger Ailes did something similar, but specifically focused on political image control at the very highest level.
With Nixon?
Yeah. Ailes sold himself to Richard Nixon as an indispensable image consultant, which was a pretty revolutionary concept back then. After Nixon won, Ailes presented this confidential memo offering 16 specific strategies to control Nixon's TV image.
Arguing that the public's overall impression was key to re-election.
Right, that the composite impression of the president, formed over 4 years, would ultimately determine his success.
And this is where the media control really edges into propaganda, isn't it? Ailes suggested a White House-produced program.
He did. He wasn't interested in just managing passive media coverage. He suggested creating a program starring the president, essentially making it Mr. Nixon's own TV show.
Wow.
Yeah. This show would serve explicitly as propaganda, ensuring the public felt informed and connected directly to the president, crucially, without the messy interference of traditional journalism. It was the engineering of reality, long before the cable news era he would later help define. Hashtag 2.2, the illusion of transparency in the tech age.
This impulse to control perception finds its ultimate and often most deceptive expression in the modern tech age, doesn't it? Where the currency is this dazzling, world-changing vision coupled with intense, almost paranoid operational secrecy.
Absolutely. You just have to look at the cautionary tale of Theranos.
Elizabeth Holmes built a culture of absolute paranoia around non-disclosure, didn't she? Going way beyond standard corporate practice to protect a product that, well, didn't actually exist.
Her need for secrecy was total. It was systemic. She required NDAs not just from every single employee, which is fairly standard,
Right.
but also from anyone who entered the offices or did business with the company.
Yep.
That included investors, partners, even vendors delivering supplies.
And the reason for this aggressive control became tragically clear later on.
It did. The company was running its proprietary device for only a tiny handful of tests, masking this massive operational failure. The secrecy was the only thing holding the illusion together.
The scale of the deception when it finally came out was just astounding.
It truly was. I mean, the deception culminated in the company being forced to void tens of thousands of test results, including a staggering 2 years' worth of Edison tests.
Which effectively admitted their proprietary device's results could not be relied upon.
Exactly. It was outright fraud, protected by this iron curtain of legal paranoia.
Now, we see a different, though maybe equally problematic, dissonance at WeWork, another startup built on a grand communal vision, but fueled by the CEO's staggering personal extravagance.
Right. Adam Neumann famously preached this ethos of we over me to inspire endless workdays and personal sacrifice from his staff, the hustle culture narrative.
While living a very different reality himself.
Precisely the opposite of communal sacrifice. The sources revealed details about his expansive personal staff, including 3 nannies for his 5 children, sometimes dressed in matching white polo shirts stitched with the letter N.
Like a personal brand or royalty?
Kind of, yeah, a symbol of his self-styled royalty. And the cost of maintaining that image, that persona, was astronomical.
It really underscores the deep contradiction, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Beyond his main homes, the Newmans rented 3 separate houses in the Hamptons, specifically to accommodate this sprawling staff, which included not one, but multiple surfing coaches.
Multiple surfing coaches,
all of whom were naturally required to sign NDAs. The business preached community, but its leader lived in this intensely guarded, secretive luxury, completely blurring the lines between corporate capital and personal enrichment.
This strategic use of an eccentric persona to mask structural flaws isn't unique to WeWork, though. We saw something similar with Sam Bankman-Fried, right?
Oh, definitely. The image he projected was the hot relic fancier in baggy shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt. This whole image of a disinterested genius, too focused on coding to care about appearances.
And that image was incredibly effective in luring sophisticated investors.
Astonishingly effective, as Bankman-Fried himself had to concede. He said face-to-face encounters worked because people simply didn't believe this, 26-year-old white guy until he pulled out his phone and showed them his trading account balance. The money was the ultimate credential.
But the real deception was structural, hidden beneath that eccentric veneer.
Exactly. The sources reveal the core of the deception lay in the complex internal mechanics of FTX.
What was the key issue?
Well, FTX exempted Alameda Research, which was Sam's private trading firm, from the very risk rules that governed every other trader on the exchange. This massive structural failure, this loophole, allowed Alameda to lose, in effect, infinity dollars before any liquidation protocols kicked in.
So most people saw the messy genius with money. They didn't see the massive self-serving exception built into the platform's core code.
And that right there is the modern blueprint for deception. Structure the financial escape route while mesmerizing the public and investors with the vision and the quirky persona. Hashtag 2.3, acquiring legitimacy through association.
Okay, so the final step in this modern playbook seems to be borrowing authority. When deception is required, these titans strategically acquire legitimacy, either through projecting expertise or associating with established high-status contacts.
Exactly. The Sackler family perfected this in the pharmaceutical space.
Arthur Sackler specifically transformed his public image when appearing before the Kefauver Committee on Capitol Hill. It sounds like he was really performing authority.
He absolutely was. Compared to a previous, less confident appearance a decade earlier, he adopted a completely different demeanor for the Senate committee. He spoke with this pronounced patrician accent, projecting tremendous medical and scientific authority.
While downplaying his influence.
Simultaneously, yes. Claiming his influential advertising agency was merely a pretty tiny operation to downplay its massive reach and influence on drug marketing. The performance was meticulously designed to acquire legitimacy and deflect serious scrutiny.
And his family's company, Purdue Pharma, then leveraged that projected authority with calculated deception to market OxyContin, which directly fueled the opioid crisis.
This was the great con, as the sources call it, and it was meticulously scripted. Purdue had somehow gained FDA approval for a claim that OxyContin was less prone to abuse than other painkillers,
Despite a lack of evidence.
despite a profound lack of solid evidence to support that assertion. Sales representatives then engage in this coordinated and heavily scripted campaign, repeatedly telling doctors, often citing this specific 1% figure, that less than 1% of users became addicted.
And our sources indicate this wasn't just rogue reps, it was actual corporate policy.
That's the critical point. Internal notes later analyzed by prosecutors showed that these fraudulent claims were being documented all across the country. The scale was so vast that a map used in the analysis highlighted all the states where sales reps had made documented fraudulent claims, and basically the entire map was colored red.
Wow, that proves it was a strategy deployed system-wide.
Undeniably.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to media and cultural legitimacy, we see the strategic use of high-status contacts with someone like Oprah Winfrey. She used her immense celebrity to solidify her place among the traditional American elite, didn't she?
Yeah, Oprah understood that while she had immense financial power and celebrity, she maybe needed that extra layer of cultural and social cachet. And she achieved this through strategic association.
Like attending Maria Shriver's wedding.
Exactly. Where she famously chatted intimately with Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis about, life and perms and spirituality.
That wasn't just a friendly chat, though. She followed up with a highly specific, personalized gesture, didn't she?
She did, and it was very clever. She cemented that newly acquired high-status relationship by sending $650 replicas of a specific leather sailing jacket she had worn that weekend to both Eunice Shriver and Ethel Kennedy.
So it wasn't just gift-giving.
No, it transformed her powerful commercial status into established cultural and political legitimacy by connecting her success directly to the undeniable social royalty of the Kennedy family. It's essentially borrowing the aura of an American dynasty.
Okay, we've traced this playbook from the quiet discretion of early industrial control all the way to the amplified, sometimes deceptive celebrity of the modern CEO. Now, we really need to confront the broader global consequences of this relentless pursuit of unassailable influence, starting with massive wealth concentration and how it's justified.
Yeah, looking at the historical trends, the data on global inequality really confirms that the mechanisms perfected by these titans are constantly reinforcing divergence. It's not a new story, but the scale is immense.
We can look at French data, for instance, which provides an incredibly long view, right? Historically, the top decile's share of total wealth reached a staggering 90% in the Belle Epoque era.
90%. That was specifically around 1910, 1920. It's an almost unbelievable level of concentration.
And while that figure dropped significantly due to the shocks of the two world wars,
Right, falling to between 60% and 70% in the mid-20th century.
it is inexorably rising again. Today, the top decile's share stands around 60–65%.
Exactly. It feels like we are reversing the historical accident of deconcentration that was caused by global conflict and the policies that followed.
So, if wealth concentration is rising again, how do the winners, both then and now, justify this divergence? The argument seems surprisingly constant since the 19th century.
They really are. That justification is deeply rooted in liberal economic thought. The 19th century liberal economist Charles Dunoyer provided the classical framework. He argued that the new industrial regime destroys artificial inequalities, things like aristocratic privilege or inherited titles. But, he claimed, it merely highlights natural inequalities, meaning inherent differences in physical, intellectual, and moral capabilities, to defend the privileges and vast wealth accumulated by the winners.
That concept of natural inequalities sounds like the ideological ancestor of the modern genius CEO or meritocracy narrative we hear so much today, especially in tech.
Precisely. It allows the winner to claim that their extreme wealth isn't the result of systemic advantage or luck or ruthlessness, but rather a just reward for superior talent and unprecedented productivity. This ideological foundation is absolutely key to maintaining political peace during periods of high concentration.
And that wealth concentration isn't just felt domestically, it creates international instability, particularly when capital imbalances arise between nations.
Absolutely. Even slight differences in growth rates or savings rates between countries can lead to some nations having much higher capital-to-income ratios than others.
Okay, remind us what the capital to income ratio is.
It's basically the total value of all assets in a country, property, stocks, bonds, etc., compared to its annual national income.
And when that ratio gets too high, what happens?
Well, when the equilibrium ratio rises too high, it signals potential trouble. Our sources cite Japan in 1990 and Spain just before the 2007-2008 crisis as examples. In those cases, the national capital amounted to 7 or even 8 years of national income, respectively.
That sounds incredibly inflated.
It is. When assets become that inflated relative to income, it drives domestic asset prices, like real estate and stocks, to unprecedented levels, forming spectacular bubbles that eventually burst and create serious political and economic tensions between nations. #tags 3.2 automation and the shifting job market.
Okay, connecting this rising concentration back to the modern titans, the leaders of tech seem poised to accelerate this divergence even further through the massive force of automation and AI.
Yeah, this next phase of productivity promises to reshape the job market in some really fundamental ways.
The sources indicate that the massive productivity gains coming from deep learning automation will eliminate jobs for huge numbers of workers. But the crucial difference this time seems to be who gets hit.
That's the potentially scary part. These layoffs apparently won't discriminate by the color of one's collar. We're looking at automation hitting highly educated white-collar workers just as hard as manual laborers.
So, a specialized professional degree is no longer a guarantee of job security.
Not necessarily. Not when you're competing against machines that can spot complex data patterns instantly or perform sophisticated analytical tasks.
So, what are the key limitations that AI still struggles with? Where might workers find some relative safety?
Well, AI still excels mostly at narrow tasks that can be optimized based on data. Its limitations generally fall into 3 main areas. First, it remains stubbornly unable to interact naturally with people.
Meaning jobs requiring high emotional intelligence or nuanced social interaction are relatively safe for now.
That seems to be the case. Second, the physical constraints.
Right.
It struggles to imitate the dexterity of our fingers and limbs. So complex motor control and precision required for nuanced physical tasks are still very difficult to automate effectively.
And the third area.
Crucially, AI also struggles with cross-domain thinking on creative tasks, or ones requiring complex strategy. Basically, jobs where inputs and outcomes aren't easily quantifiable, and which require abstract common sense, judgment, and genuine novelty.
But overall, the power structure that controls this powerful technology is intensely consolidated, isn't it? Which just feeds back into the inequality issue.
Oh, absolutely. That power is already consolidated in the hands of what the sources call the 7 giants of the AI age: Google, Facebook, or Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent.
Notice the geographical split there, almost evenly divided between the US and China.
Exactly. These corporate juggernauts completely dominate the AI economy by deploying billions of dollars in cash and utilizing these dizzying, unparalleled stockpiles of data. It gives them a near unassailable lead in innovation and market control. Tag 3.3 impunity and the corporate game.
This immense concentration of power, both financial and technological, only seems to reinforce a sense of impunity among corporate leaders, doesn't it? The tactical ruthlessness we saw way back with Vanderbilt and Rockefeller, just translated into sophisticated corporate warfare, seems to remain the standard operating procedure.
It really does.
Yeah.
Take the famous leveraged buyout of RGR Nabisco and the tactics of its CEO, Ross Johnson. He was famously and colorfully likened to a corporate Eddie Haskell.
Ha! That's a perfect analogy for duplicity. How did he manifest that internal deceit?
Well, the description means he was constantly sucking up to the senior management, specifically the CEO, Robert Schaeberle, while simultaneously and ruthlessly dismantling his competitors internally, metaphorically kicking the beaver in the teeth.
So his methods were geared toward quiet internal coup.
Totally. He systematically replaced 21 of the top 24 Nabisco officers with his own allies from Standard Brands after the merger.
And the sources emphasize the quietness of the coup, suggesting the previous Nabisco officers were eliminated so smoothly that their former CEO never realized what had happened.
It's power exerted not through noise, but through sheer, stealthy organizational maneuvering.
And that quiet ruthlessness applies even in the complex power dynamics of modern media empires, like the struggles within CBS Viacom.
Absolutely. Where internal struggles between management and the controlling family member can reach these absurd levels of corporate intrigue.
Right, when the board was struggling to manage the fraught relationship with the controlling family member, Shuri Redstone, they had to contemplate what was internally referred to as the nuclear option. What was that?
The nuclear option was actually voting away control entirely, a massive structural maneuver. Why?
Yeah.
Specifically to prevent the CEO at the time, Leslie Moonves, from quitting amid all the chaos.
And the crucial insight for us listening is
The crucial insight is that the director's primary duty was seen as acting in shareholder interest, which meant preventing market chaos and a plunging stock price, even if it meant directly defying the wishes of the controlling family member. Avoiding market turbulence became the ultimate corporate rationale, justifying internal warfare to maintain stability.
okay, and finally, looking globally, outside the relatively open economies of the West, we see that extreme wealth is often generated not just by financial mastery, but by political accommodation, right? By being a non-threatening political entity.
That's the reality captured perfectly in the analysis of the so-called Asian godfathers in centralized Southeast Asian states. Our sources confirm that true rags-to-riches stories are exceptional there,
Why is that?
because domestic economies are often too closely controlled by governments. Building immense wealth frequently requires guangxi, which basically translates to deep political connections and favors. It's about who you know, not just what you do.
We see this clearly with figures like Suharto in Indonesia, for example.
Yes. Suharto, the former leader, heavily relied on business cronies, but they often had to be, quote, unthreatening ethnic Chinese outsiders.
Unthreatening ethnic Chinese outsiders. Why specifically?
Because Suharto explicitly complained that pribumi, that's native non-Chinese businessmen, could not be trusted to stay politically neutral or avoid eventually challenging his rule.
So that highlights that in many powerful global centers, the architecture of ambition is built not primarily on economic competition, but on maintaining political accommodation and, crucially, never appearing threatening to the ruling power structure.
Exactly. In essence, whether the game is played in 1870s Ohio or 21st century Jakarta, the pursuit of immense unassailable wealth is fundamentally and always intertwined with the political apparatus. Hashtag tag outro.
Well, we've concluded our deep dive into the architecture and ambition. The core synthesis seems pretty clear. Titanic wealth, whether it's founded on physical industry like railroads or steel or on modern tech unicorns,
Yeah.
it demands not just visionary execution, but the highly tactical management of image.
That's right. And that image control runs the whole gamut, from Rockefeller's calculated modesty, which acted as a kind of liability shield,
Right.
to someone like Adam Neumann's self-serving glamour, which maybe served as a dazzling distraction. But it was always coupled with an unwavering, often ruthless focus on expansion and control.
And we noted the historical context of the current inequality problem. The shocks of World War I and World War II were the primary reason wealth concentration briefly dropped.
Which created what our sources call the patrimonial middle class, that segment of society whose wealth comes primarily from saved capital or inheritance, and which now owns about a third of national wealth in many developed countries.
Okay, so here's the final provocative thought for you, our listener, to consider. What happens when the underlying logic of wealth accumulation, which seems persistent, is now powered by exponential technologies like AI and leveraged by modern titans who own these vast stockpiles of data and cash? What happens when that accelerates divergence at an unprecedented and systemic pace?
And if the middle class's significant share of national wealth was essentially, as the sources suggest, a historical accident created by global conflict and the subsequent policy responses, what responsibility does that patrimonial middle class have now in confronting the political tensions created by this growing concentration of capital? Especially now that the divergence is accelerating again, perhaps not by accident this time, but by the strategic design embedded in the modern Titans playbook. That really is the ultimate question of influence and power for the next century.